Hi, everybody. Scott Costa, publisher of TED Magazine. Thanks for watching this digital edition podcast from Distributed with TED Magazine. We have David Clark on. David's a director at Ark Malibu, and he's one of those M&A guys. And we've certainly been going through an interesting year of mergers and acquisitions in 2024. Now we're looking ahead to 2025 too. So I'm going to do a little bit of both. And David's a great guest on the podcast, and I always appreciate you coming on. David, again, thanks for being here. Let's go backwards before we go forwards, if that's okay. Talk to me a little bit about, again, what did 2024 look like? Did it kind of live up to what your expectations were? And what did you see happening throughout the year?
Yeah, Scott, always enjoy being on this pod with you. Appreciate you having me on again. 2024 was a bit of a roller coaster. Came in with a bang. I think there were something like 11 deals in electrical distribution in the first quarter of this year. And then things cooled off a little bit. And I think people, both within electrical distribution and more broadly across M&A, have been waiting to see if the Fed was able to achieve this soft landing everyone's been asking about and projecting. And it looks like they have been. So I believe that 2024, there was a little bit of a calm before the storm. And we're seeing a lot more interest picking up for 2025. So while the deals slowed down a little bit throughout this year, we think that there's going to be a lot more activity next year and beyond.
Yeah. Don't take me too deep into the process because, again, I don't want people they do their thing. They're just private what they're doing. And if they want to have merger and acquisition activity, they're allowed to do that without me interrupting them sitting in their boardrooms and everything. But take me into a little bit what you were talking about, how it kind of cooled, sort of a little bit of the mindset of the year, though. In terms of, we do want to be active, but what are some of the signs we're looking for? Where we at on that?
Yeah. So I guess more broadly, I've always said electrical distribution largely moves with the broader market. This particular industry is a little bit more susceptible to rate fluctuations just because of their end market exposure to new construction, both residential and commercial. So you see a little bit wider gap in earnings when rates are high versus some other industries that we work with. So for us, there were a lot of conversations late last year, early this year, when earnings were strong about exiting. And a lot of deal flow happened in the beginning of this year just because performance was largely really good at the tail end of last year. I always say when we talk to business owners, you can tell when strong M&A activity is going to happen if you've seen strong earnings for 3 to 6 months. 6 months later, there's probably going to be a lot of deals. So for us, with this rate uncertainty, a lot of our clients in distribution and potential clients down the road in distribution, when we talk to them, didn't have great starts to this year. So a lot of construction across the country slowed down, both residential and commercial. And people kind of hit the pause button saying, maybe now's not the right time. My earnings aren't going to be at the right level. I don't know if I'm going to hit my 2024 numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking, Scott, to anywhere between 10 and 20 different owners at any given time. And more often than not, they're not ready to go. But they are preparing 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road to make sure that they're setting up their business for the ideal exit opportunity down the road. So more often than not, people think that we have, sharp elbows and sharp teeth because we're an investment banker and just trying to get them to sell their business or to buy. If you're not at Ark Malibu, right? You're trying to get them to buy a business, but we're really not. We're here for the long haul. We're making sure that business owners, family-owned, founder-led business owners are setting up their businesses and their families for success. If that exit opportunity is a year from now, 2 years from now, or 10 years from now. And we have conversations in electrical distribution that fit all of those time horizons.
Yeah. Okay. So weird question, but hang in there with me on this one, if you don't mind, David. Here we go. It's December, so it's employee review time. It's time to review the year. Would you say that as you look back on 2024, did it kind of live up to expectations? Did it, go beyond expectations? Did it quite not meet expectations? How would you, if you had to give the year a review, did you say it kind of played out the way you thought it would when it was December 2023? Give me an idea how you see it.
Honestly, so the last time we talked, Scott, I think we expected more activity this year than what actually transpired. And I think what ended up happening was a lot of the conversations that we were having, business owners decided to hit the pause button because, one, not just because earnings were a little bit lower in the first half, but they saw a light coming at the end of the tunnel, right? So they saw some activity pick up in the middle of the year to say, hey, not only is it not the right time for me to sell, but I can see that we're going to have strong earnings potential in the back half, which a lot of them have actually, that's come to fruition. And we think 2025 is going to be a strong year. Therefore, and I would say too, a lot of the smaller players, Scott, we're starting to get rumblings from a lot of the large buyers that maybe some of these smaller players are getting a little bit too small to get the interest that a maybe $2, $3, $4 million EBITDA business could have gotten 2 years from now. These big buyers are getting a lot bigger. They're not buying little $2 million EBITDA distributors anymore. They are investing in full-blown M&A teams. Border States just hired one recently, right? They promoted internally. And they are buying, 20 million EBITDA businesses, $30 million EBITDA businesses, not 2, 3 million. So I think people as well are starting to say, okay, let me scale, let me get up to that 5, 6, 7 EBITDA mark so I can further leverage an auction process down the road. So I would say, when we were talking in December, we thought that there would be more activity than there was in Q2, 3, and 4. Q1 certainly blew us away, but the back half of the year was a little bit softer than we would have expected.
Okay, so I have so many follow-ups. Hang in there with me on this. But again, let's talk about the bigness, I suppose. Is that sort of like the way of the world, at least from this point forward? It's like, hey, we're really looking at major acquisitions now. It's not just like and I know that there's a lot of value add acquisitions that distributors are making right now. It's like, hey, we just want to be a more valuable company. We're acquiring an engineering firm, or we're hiring something that's going to make the value better. But are you looking at, is what you're saying, hey, what we're probably looking at going forward is some bigger deals?
Yep. So it's actually interesting, not just in electrical distribution, but the officers of Art Malibu were saying throughout the year, wow, we've got a barbell effect coming. We've got a ton of huge deals in our pipeline and a bunch of small deals in our pipeline. For whatever reason, the middle market was hitting pause throughout the year. I think in electrical distribution, what you're going to see is you're still going to see large deals and small deals, but the buyers are going to be different. So it's not just, if you look at your top 100 list, right, within electrical distribution, most of the buying has been done from players 1 through 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever it may be. I think what I'm starting to see is players between 50 million and 300 million revenue are starting to call and say, how do we get on your buyers list? How can we get involved in your processes moving forward? And how can we make sure that we're competitive against some of these larger players? So I just think you're still going to see deals happen, but the buyer dynamics are going to start to shift to where those regional players are seeing what's happening and the synergies that can be had from the larger players and the M&A activity they're doing, and they're trying to replicate that as well.
Sure. Okay, so let's go back a little bit, because another comment that you made that I'm grabbing onto is rate uncertainty. And explain to us again the importance of interest rates, rate uncertainty, the idea of making it less expensive to borrow money, and how that plays into M&A activity right now and certainly going forward.
Absolutely. So on a broader perspective, if buyers are spending more money through larger rates to borrow money, they can't pay as much as they can in lower rate environments. So therefore, sellers are not as willing to sell their businesses because the valuations are typically lower. That's just kind of a very, very high level, quick spark note as to why rate environment impacts mergers and acquisitions. Because more often than not, players are relying on debt to get these deals done. Now, the big strategic players, particularly in this industry, are less rate sensitive because they're largely funding these acquisitions with cash on hand. So I guess two things. One, valuations typically come down a little bit. and the prevailing buyers are more so strategic players rather than private equity. When rates come down, which they are expected to over the coming 18 months, valuations should tick up. And I think private equity is going to be a bigger buyer within electrical distribution as well. We've gotten a ton of calls this year from private equity players who are seeing the tailwinds, electrification, data center infrastructure, you name it, that private equity players are starting to become a lot more interested in electrical distribution than we saw 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I do think that there will be some more private equity investment in this. You saw it with one of our deals with Wiseway going to CID Capital. So I do think that that's going to be another player. Private equity is going to be a player in more processes moving forward. Now, within electrical distribution, you've got a double-edged sword, because not only are the prevailing M&A trends that happen when rates are higher or lower happening, but your business is directly impacted by these rates because there could be less construction in your part, right? So they're just a little bit more, electrical distributors are just a little bit more impacted by rate fluctuation than some of the other industries that we deal with. So that is a little bit more of a double-edged sword. But, most economists that I'm seeing are, the market's already pricing in 200 basis points of rate decreases over the next 18 months, which means the environment and the foundation is being laid for a strong year of 2025 M&A.
So if that happens, if we're talking about 200 basis points, I mean, are you saying that you're expecting to be crazy busy over the next, again, 12 to 18 months?
That would be what most investment bankers would tell you. Yep. So if rates come down, M&A activity should tick up. And, we saw record highs in 21 and 22 of M&A activity immediately following COVID, because there was so much money in the market, right, with the stimulus money and whatnot, paired with lower interest rates. And then 23 and 24, a little reversion back to the norm. I think that, one, a lot of strategic players have plenty of cash on hand because they didn't do deals most of them did not throughout the year this year. They're ready to make some investments in 25. And the rates are coming down. That is creating a storm that should drive more M&A activity in 25. And we're starting to see our pipeline pick up this month in October. We're recording this end of October. Mm-hmm. October was a strong month with regards to a lot more business owners picking up the phone. They're starting to think through the strategic plan for 2025, which may or may not include a sale. So, yeah, we're starting to see some of the inklings just from our internal metrics and KPIs that 25 should be a strong year, and electrical distribution and more broadly.
Exactly. It's just a fascinating landscape. And again, David Clark, who's a director at Arc Malibu, you always give us great insight into, hey, what do we expect coming up? What's going to be happening, in the next year, or certainly in the next month even. And when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, it's just a fascinating situation that's really kind of got everybody in our supply chain thinking, not just on the distributor side, but the manufacturer side too. And maybe we should get into that a little bit here. Again, we're talking about distributors mostly, but certainly manufacturing's been consolidating. And are you seeing that kind of activity also?
Absolutely. Yep. More and more. And that's just something just within our own business model. We're not just doing distribution. We have strong manufacturing expertise as well, just across the board. So we're doing our best to get out to more verticals within electrical distribution, not just the core electrical distributors. And yeah, there's been a few manufacturers that have reached out to us and have relied on our expertise, because we have to understand the full value chain. In order for us to appropriately sell a distributor, we've got to understand the full value chain and supply chain. So yeah, I do think that the synergies that exist within distribution, a lot of them still exist within the manufacturing side as well. So, and honestly, if you really go through the full supply chain, we've had some contractors reach out too. So it's not just the suppliers, your customers. There might be some consolidation across your customer base. And as that consolidation happens with your customer base, that would theoretically, the conversations we've had, favor the bigger players who have, and I've always said this, right? Within distribution, the thing that the bigger players cannot replicate with these small, middle-sized distributors is the relationships you have with your suppliers and with your customers. If these customers are consolidating like we might see over the next 3 or 5 years, it's going to be a tougher landscape because now those bigger players theoretically have the conversations and have relationships with the buyers of your customers. So as more consolidation happens across the supply chain, the more consolidation I think will happen within distribution as well.
Yeah, and we've seen some amazing, decent sized contractor consolidations in 2024. 2024 has been an amazing year. And from what you're saying, 2025 looks like it's going to be interesting too. So David Clark, again, a director at Ark Malibu. Hey, thanks for taking a little bit of time. Give me a little lay of the land. I really appreciate it. It's always great talking to you. We got to do this a little more regular. You okay with coming on more often on the podcast?
Absolutely, Scott. I'll see you at the NAAD events next year as well. And, you know, we could probably talk more if I'm not chirping your ear off about Big 12 football. But, you know, in the future, just tell me to stop talking so we can have more time together on the podcast. But absolutely, you let me know. And my phone's always on. My door's always open.
Yeah, for clarity, David's a Cincinnati guy. I'm usually in my office. I got my Kansas Jayhawk poster. We're in the same conference. We've failed to meet expectations on the football side. Basketball season has started. So, you know, at least I got that to hopefully fall back on. Again, David Clark, thanks for hopping on the podcast. And if folks have questions for me, they want to talk about mergers and acquisitions or any of our podcasts, or they want to talk about TED Magazine or TEDMag.com, Electrified, or our newsletters, as always, 2 ways you can track me down. Give me a phone call, 314-812-5311, or you can send me an email, scosta, SCOSTA at NAAD.org. Love to trade ideas with you, but until we get a chance to talk again, thanks for watching on our digital edition, this Distributed with TED Magazine podcast.